Good evening, everyone. I am the DOC Communications Director. My name is Shannon Loehrke. I want to thank you for joining us for this virtual town hall on the phased closure of the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Stillwater. Commissioner Schnell will be speaking shortly about the work that has been completed to date, the current status of Minnesota's correctional facilities, and how we are planning for the next phases of this transition. But before we begin, I'll cover a few brief housekeeping items. Live captions are available for this presentation. You can turn captions on using the controls in your video platform. If you need assistance with digital accessibility, please contact Roy's Witty by phone or email using the information on the screen. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted after the event. You may submit questions electronically at any point during the presentation. Just please use the chat feature. We will reserve time at the end to address as many questions as possible. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Schnell.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Paul Schnell. I'm the Commissioner here at the Department of Corrections. MCF-Stillwater has a long and significant history in Minnesota. The state's first territorial prison opened in Stillwater in 1853, before Minnesota was even achieved statehood. In 1914, operations moved to the current site in Bayport, where the facility remains today. For decades, Stillwater has operated as a close custody facility for adult men. 26 buildings on the property are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the facility is home to the Prison Mirror, the nation's oldest continuously operating prison newspaper. At the same time, after more than a century of use, the facility's infrastructure has aged well beyond modern correctional standards. Concerns about Stillwater's long-term viability have been discussed by state leaders for decades. In fact, Minnesota Correctional Facility Oak Park Heights was originally intended to replace it. Multiple studies and reports have identified serious safety risks, including poor sight lines, manual locking systems, a lack of temperature control, and extensive deferred maintenance. In fact, deferred maintenance at Stillwater alone exceeded $180 million, representing about 26% of all the DOC's deferred maintenance statewide. Full replacement of the facility would cost the state more than $1.3 billion. Taken together, these realities led state leaders to conclude that continuing to operate MCF-Stillwater is not safe or responsible long-term economically viable solution. In May of 2025, legislative leaders agreed to a phased closure of the Stillwater facility, with full closure expected to be accomplished by June 30th of 2029. Included in the legislation was the requirement for the DOC to submit a strategic closure plan, which we submitted on July 31st. That plan outlined how we will minimize layoffs, maximize staff opportunities for transfer, communicate and engage with stakeholders, reduce disruption to incarcerated individuals, and ensure that critical services like education, treatment, family visits, and case planning continues as smoothly as possible. This framework guided all of our closure planning activities. At every step, our approach was designed to prioritize safety, fairness, and transparency. The pace of Stillwater's closure was largely driven by legislative budget direction. The DOC was required to reduce the Stillwater's budget by $20 million in fiscal year 2026 as part of the phased closure plan. To achieve that, we significantly downsized operations, reducing both population and staffing by approximately 50% in this fiscal year. Looking ahead, additional savings will be required each year, increasing to $48 million in fiscal year 2029. Each future phase will build on the foundation we have established this year. At the close of the legislative session, Stillwater employed 567 staff. By October of 2025, that number had decreased to 231. From the beginning, our priority has been to minimize layoffs and maximize opportunities for staff to remain employed within the DOC. In August, the the DOC's Human Resources staff and labor partners met individually with each of the 347 impacted employees to walk through their individual options and answer questions. As a result, we retain more than 99% of Stillwater staff. Importantly, no uniform staff were laid off, and every certified correctional officer from CO2 through captain remains employed with the DOC. Health services and teaching staff were also fully retained. All probationary CO1s, correction officer ones, in good standing were advanced into permanent positions. In September and October of 2025, 149 staff transferred to other facilities, primarily Oak Park Heights and Lino Lakes. Leadership at receiving facilities reported that transfers of staff were quickly integrated into their operations and brought valuable experience and are contributing positively from the very minute they arrived. Those transfers also support incarcerated populations, programming continuity across the system. Immediately following the closure announcement, we established standing weekly meetings with union leadership. Ongoing collaboration with labor partners has been critical to the progress that we've made to date. Turning to the incarcerated population, the DOC reduced the Stillwater's population by approximately 50%, from just under 1,200 in May to 553 by October 1. Before the transfers began, DOC leadership met directly with incarcerated individuals to gather feedback and to help improve and plan for the transition. We developed a structured decision-making process and a relocation rubric to ensure that decisions made about transfers were safe, fair, and consistent. The rubric prioritized medical and mental health needs, followed by treatment and education needs, risk assessments, and case planning considerations. Higher education students were transferred to facilities where they could continue their coursework, and specialized treatment programming beds were filled first. We also coordinated case planning and expedited visiting applications to reduce disruption to the fullest extent possible. Between June and October of 2025, the DOC completed more than 2,000 IP transfers statewide, including 728 individuals who were transferred out of Stillwater and 244 who were transferred in. Managing these transfers required careful system-wide coordination to place individuals where their needs could be met while minimizing movement and disruption. Statewide, the incarcerated population remains stable and manageable. Today, the total population is 7,915 individuals, well below the levels seen throughout much of the 2010s. That stability has allowed us to manage Stillwater's closure responsibly and without overburdening other facilities. At the same time, populations are returning to pre-pandemic levels, and we are actively expanding programming and work assignments to maintain engagement and reduce idle time across the system. As for Stillwater, as we reduce the facility's size, we shifted the focus to specialized living units. In phase one, all IPs at Stillwater fit into three groups that are listed here. First is the Atlantis SUD Inpatient Substance Use Disorder Treatment Program. we expanded the unit's capacity from 36 individuals to 93 IPs. The DOC is the largest substance use disorder treatment provider in the state, and approximately 77% of our population has an SUD diagnosis and require a level of treatment. Stillwater also serves as the placement site for individuals with long-term restrictive housing sentences. IPs in this unit are transferred back to their sending facility after their restrictive housing sentence has been completed. And lastly, the facility includes 2 earned living units that house individuals who have demonstrated ongoing positive pro-social behavior and success during incarceration, and it can be housed in units that are minimally staffed. Research from other states has shown that these types of honors units can significantly reduce violence and misconduct in prison. The DOC launched a similar earned living unit at MCF-Faribault around the same time. As it relates to the Stillwater ELUs, residents there have greater freedoms, responsibilities, and choices. At Stillwater, 863 applications were reviewed, with 310 individuals approved, and a wait list has been established. Selection is based on behavioral history, program participation, staff recommendation, and other factors. Participants report a strong sense of accountability and community. And since its inception, there have been no critical incidents. The IPs have created their own unit mission and value statements and are leading monthly town halls and a variety of programming. Higher education participation has more than doubled from 19 to 44 students. Visiting room hours and rules have been expanded, which helps these IPs maintain family connection. The facility has also launched an ELU mentor program for restrictive housing. Folks in restrictive housing can learn coping strategies and norms from other IPs who have successfully earned greater responsibility before they return to their sending facility. Based on these initial outcomes and findings, the DOC is exploring additional ELUs and honor units across all facilities. From the very start, communication and transparency has been central to this effort. We've used regular memos to staff, to the incarcerated population and their families, created a public web page with ongoing updates, and held town halls and briefings with staff, local leaders, and legislators. Our commitment is to remain transparent, accessible, and responsive throughout this process. Decommissioning and management studies are being developed and are due to the legislature by September 30th of 2026. The decommissioning study will provide the legislature with recommendations and considerations for what to do with the property after it is no longer used as a correctional facility. The management study will provide strategic recommendations for long-term management of the incarcerated population and DOC staff across the system. Both these studies will help inform our next steps and help us to achieve necessary budget reductions. Our next steps will be to prioritize maximizing staffing capacity to strengthen our workforce across the facilities, mitigating security risks and ensuring safe management of the population across the system, expanding programming and treatment access so individuals do not lose opportunities, addressing facility infrastructure needs to support long-term operations, and managing fiscal pressures to deliver cost efficiency and sustainability. While meeting the budget reduction expectations, we must also ensure a balance across the system, making sure that no single facility is excessively overburdened, that staff remain supported, and that incarcerated people maintain access to essential services and opportunities. I'm now going to turn it over to Capital Resource Director Carl Hunt to talk more about the decommissioning study and the public engagement side of that plan. Carl?
Thank you, Commissioner Schnell. My name is Carl Hunt. I'm the Corrections Capital Resource Director. And the state has engaged with a multidisciplinary team led by Sandbolte Architecture. Well, this team has been engaged for several months now, working through several of the boundary surveys, utility surveys, working through hazardous materials surveys and assessments, some asset disposition considerations, and some security analysis. The next phase of this is going to be on the outreach, community engagement piece of it, as we want to make sure we do not overlook that. So this decommissioning study stakeholder engagement is in 5 tiers. It starts with the local elected officials, which are set to tour on the end of this month, 27th of January. It's going to move into regional and then state and regulatory departments, legislators, general public, as well as tribal. General public engagement likely will happen in the spring of 2026. This will happen in a public forum type meetings, potential for informational booths at community events, and potential for private developer info session and Q&A. This engagement will present the concepts, disseminate information, and most importantly, will gather feedback from the community for us to roll up into our report due to legislature later in 2026. I'll now turn it over to Warden Bill Bolin to share his direct experience at the facility.
Good evening. I'm Bill Bolin, the warden here at Stillwater. Thank you, first off, for everyone joining us this evening. I wanted to talk a little bit about the transition as the commissioner identified, in particular with our staff members. Prior to May, we had 567 employees at Stillwater. As we sit here today, we've got a little over 250 employees. I can say that the transition from that number was rather difficult, especially after the announcement with our legislative body identifying the phase closure of Stillwater. The second piece was with this, again, as the commissioner identified, that we had just about 1,180 inmates within the facility prior to the announcement, and that number now is down to the 553 mark. So there was a lot of work that was actively involved with not only our shared services managers, but also with all staff across the department in order to get to those numbers. As I indicated, transition was very, very smooth. I think it was very well planned out. We had active involvement, not only with our staff members, but with our population. As the commissioner indicated, today we do have 2 living units that are dedicated as earned living units. We've got 185 participants in one of the units, and then the other 110 on the other side in a living unit. Along with that, we expanded our Atlantis treatment program from 36 participants to 96 participants at this time, or actually it's 93 participants at this time. And then our restrictive housing number will remain at a 150 inmate cap. Part of my expectations, even prior to the announcement with the phase closure, was to be very transparent, not only with staff members, but with our inmate population. And most importantly, now kind of moving forward, I know that on a daily basis, myself, along with exec team members, administration, and staff, are having conversations not only amongst ourselves as staff members, but with our inmate population. And in particular with our earned living unit population, I have high expectations with them. They have high expectations as it relates to accountability, responsibility, and maintaining work assignment, school assignments, programming, volunteering, and really the creation of their own positive peer community. And to date, things are going very, very well. So I'm very happy and proud to know that is the movement that we're currently moving towards, and that we look forward to again giving continued updates and information not only to our staff and our population, but to our public members. At this point in time, I will turn it over to Associate Warden Dan Moe, and he can talk a little bit more in depth about programming that's taking place at Stillwater. Dan?
Thank you, Warden. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Moe. I'm the Associate Warden at the institution, and I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about our programming that we are currently doing here. As the Commissioner and the Warden stated, we have the three separate living units or styles that we're running with our SUD or Atlantis Substance Use Disorder Program, our restrictive housing or our segregation population, and then our two earned living units that are really living together at the institution. Through evidence-based practices, we are running anger management, anxiety management, parenting classes, restorative justice, T4C, which is a COG class, thinking for a change, as well as we have a full education department with GED, high school diploma, and adult diploma options. We have higher education taking place. As the Commissioner said, the cohort that we have going right now is approximately 44 IPs that are involved either in MCTC or Metro State. We have VT or vocational cabinetry, vocational machinery, vocational tattoo. We also have a barber shop that has 7 IP barbers that are cutting hair. We have a law library. We have a full library. We have a transitions resource room that is running seminars as well as pre-release classes, as well as open to the IP population to be utilized as the resource room. We have the prison mirror, as spoke about earlier. We have a mentor program going on both in our earned living units, in our SUD Atlantis living unit, and in our segregation restrictive housing living unit. We also have SDMP taking place, which is step down management in our restrictive housing. And we have just completed our self-reported assessments or our SRA for the IP population, which is going to help develop and drive our individualized plans that each IP will have as he kind of navigates the programming and what we have to offer at Stillwater while he's here.
Thank you, and thanks for all of you. And Shannon will lead here the question thing, but I wanted to just say that in addition to the things that Dan had mentioned, one of the things I think that has been remarkable is the amount of IP-led programming that's happening peer-to-peer. And I think that it's really a remarkable statement around the fact that the men who are living in those units really want to be both support and provide accountability for themselves and for one another. And that's really a great thing to see. And, while there were certainly people who were necessarily believers when we started this as an experiment at some level, I think people have really come a long way and have come to see just what's possible with this type of program. Shannon?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So there are a handful of questions now in the chat. Those of you who maybe arrived late, just feel free to put your questions in the chat. We have a number of folks here who could answer them for you, the Commissioner, the Warden, the Associate Warden. So I'll just start with the first one that came in. This person is asking, are there any laws in Minnesota regarding staff per incarcerated person? For example, 1 staff person to 15 incarcerated people.
No, they're not in the prison setting. There is not a ratio that's spelled out statutorily or from a rule standpoint for the DOC correctional facilities. That said, there's a robust staffing plan that's based upon security posts and post orders and the requirements for each of those posts. And so that's really how the staffing occurs. Based on the safety needs, and obviously, and certainly either EW Moe or Warden Bolin could talk about the fact that staffing is lighter in the earned living units because they have higher expectations, behavioral expectations for the men who are living in those units, and therefore we do not require the same level of staffing.
This person would like to know if transitions fairs will be offered again this year for incarcerated people. And I don't know if they just mean at Stillwater or across the system, but.
I'm going to speak just generally, yes. And Dan and Bill, you want to talk about what's happening there?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we will be planning a transitions fair. It will look a lot different this year, though. But we are always going to welcome all them outside stakeholders and then people that want to come in here and help the population. But as far as where we typically would do that and have some restrictions on the release and when IPs we're going to release, it'll look a little bit different this year. But we absolutely will be because our earned living unit population does not have that many releases that are taking place in it. And we really try as much as we can not to release any IPs out of our restrictive housing. So we're trying to get some sort of plan back into general population for all of our IPs that are in restrictive housing while they're here. So it might be very limited, but we do have a population that is very eager to get involved and will absolutely take to a transitions fair, but it might just look a little bit different. And we'll definitely collaborate with our transitions coordinator here as well as our other reentry folks.
The next question is about what will happen to the MinCor operation. What's going on?
MinCor remains operational at the facility. Looks a little different than it did, but the numbers are different. Opportunities were moved to other facilities, which has also been beneficial at other facilities. So those needs are being addressed and providing some opportunities elsewhere. But MinCor does remain active and operational at Stillwater.
What were the factors associated with an incarcerated person being transferred from Stillwater to maximum security at Oak Park Heights?
It could have been a variety of factors, and certainly Bill and Dan can talk more about this too. But I think certainly things like medical needs. Our transitional care unit is over at Oak Park, so there could be things like that were factors. But it also could have been disciplinary history and other things that offer at the Oak Park Heights facility that the person could benefit from. And there were some that I'm sure had maybe even had requested to be placed in one of the units there that is more of a programming focused unit, worker unit, and some of that may be related to even single bunk opportunities and those sorts of things. Dan?
Yeah, I can help with that too, Commissioner. So the majority of our IPs fit our rubric when we were exit transferring out. So any IP that had a programming need, medical need, or had an individualized plan that was going to drive where they went throughout the state was on the front end of this, right? And on the back end, some of the IPs that went from here over to Oak Park Heights, we started with the education program because there was a lot of IPs here that were not going to meet the criteria to stay in an earned living unit, but they had an educational need and they may not have been able to get that at Rush City. So we did front end that over to Oak Park Heights to make sure that we were able to still meet that education need, as well as Oak Park Heights opening another working living unit. So a lot of our IPs here that consistently were working, whether it was in our MinCor production or in food service or whatever it was, we tried to get them IPs transferred to Oak Park Heights to help open that to continue working so they didn't have a lapse in their job assignment.
This might be a good opportunity to talk more about how incentives are decided, but this person would like to know if there's any plans to allow playing cards during visits.
I'll defer to the facility leadership there.
Yeah, so we have expanded our earned living unit visiting restrictions of what we can and can't do in the visiting room. And if you haven't been out since we've changed that, I highly recommend coming out and visiting a loved one. But we do have more board games, more gaming options, and playing cards. I can't speak. I haven't been in there playing cards, but I know that is one of the things that was requested and ordered. And we have full support for that for our earned living unit IPs. The level 4 and 5 IPs out of the SUD program have their own isolated spot in the visiting room, and none of the visiting restrictions that Stillwater historically would have are going to change for that.
How does an IP know if he is on the earned living unit waiting list?
Dan, you want to address that?
Yep, no problem. So there's an application process, and all of the applications are vetted, whether it's from the Stillwater institution or statewide, through a unit management team coming to Stillwater. Unit management team over the earned living units would consist of Warden Bolin, myself, a captain, a couple of our living unit lieutenants, sergeants, different stakeholders from each place that we do have here, whether that's psych services, case management, but we bring in all applicable stakeholders to make them decisions. The original cohort, we had approximately 860 IPs that applied, and we only had 310 beds available. With that, we were able to break it down off of the Min Safety, which is an automated assessment tool that predicts our institution misconduct. Not only that, but we looked at discipline history, programming needs, and then really through that application process, asking some of them community-based questions to see what it is that IP brings to the community, is going to bring to an earned living unit style. And that's where the decisions were made. But now going forward with the waiting list, I actually run the waiting list. So all applications are sent to me as well as the Stillwater unit management team. And we don't have that many openings because once guys get in here, they seem to do very well and they have been sticking here. But when we do have an opening, we go ahead and take a look at it. And I'm trying to make sure that we are duplicating whatever that person is that exited. So example would be if somebody exited from our lifer population, we'll try to duplicate that with somebody with a similar sentence structure into that. If somebody exited that released from our minimum security unit, we try to duplicate that and take somebody that's short time with a really low classification level.
You know, this next question kind of goes into what you were just talking about, Dan. So you might want to keep talking. The question is, on average, do you know how many people come in and are released from your facility? And regarding the IPs for those earned living units, how often do people cycle out?
I can't speak on the data of actual releases per year, how often we do that, or what historically Stillwater would be. But I can tell you since September 24th, when we flipped over to the earned living unit style, we have had 9 releases out of our earned living unit, a couple, 2 or 3 out of our segregation unit, very limited, and minimally out of our Atlantis program. Of that, I can tell you, and it's very early in its adolescence, but we have had a 0 recidivism rate. We have not had an IP that released out of the earned living unit come back to custody.
Thanks, Dan. Larger question then is, how is this affecting the other facilities with population changes? Are other facilities overpopulated? That's
So I'll
probably
answer
for you,
that.
Commissioner. Yeah.
Just as a general course, no, the facilities are not overpopulated. That said, we are using the capacity. Remember that in 2019, when I first got here, we were running a population of nearly 10,000 people, housing hundreds outside out of facility. Today we house no one out of facility, with some exception of some work release placements in county jails, Greater Minnesota. But nobody is being held on a housed out of facility basis. So the population, we were able to move the population within and across the system. As was mentioned, we focused first on those specialty units and making sure that we were maximizing the use of those bed spaces. So if you had a treatment need, for instance, and you were going to go to Lino Lakes, we fill those units up with pre-treatment folks and to get them in line to access that treatment programming as we went forward. When we are tracking and have been tracking all incidents across the system, and I can tell you that when you compare the data of pre Stillwater reduction in population to post, that we are not seeing any level of significant increases in incidents occurring at facilities across the system. And we specifically focused for a period of time on looking at issues related to transfers themselves, and that did not there was no bearing on where people came from relative to issues of misconduct or challenges. You do see some issues related to volume, which is going to be a factor always. But we are not over capacity anywhere in the system.
Will there ever be a chance for someone in the earned living unit to have a meal with parents or loved ones, like bring in a pizza or sandwiches or something like that during a visit?
Dan, you want to address that? Or Bill?
Yep, no problem. Yeah. So through our visiting reps here, and I say visiting reps, our IP population as well as our visiting lieutenant and visiting staff have collaboration. And through some of these changes I talked about with the different style of visiting we're doing, previously we had a restorative justice mentor program. And in the closing of that program at the end of last year, we actually had our first friends and family meal in our visiting room. So we've talked about these as some of the possibilities. We went through the first approvals of the different style of visiting, but we absolutely are looking at options as we continue to navigate and grow through the earned living unit of how we can do this to have the friends and family meals and very specific incentivized pieces for the earned living unit in visiting.
Um, is an IP informed if they are on the ELU waiting list? I think this is for you, Dan.
Yeah, they receive a memo in the mail.
Okay. And then this is the last question that I have. Unless any more come in, but when Stillwater is closed, where will the ELU men return to? Oops, it just dropped. Okay. If someone arrived from Rush City and had to return to the same lifestyle that is offered at Rush City, would that be counterintuitive to what they had achieved while they were at the earned living unit?
Yes, the answer to that second portion of that is yes. One of the things that we kind of alluded to, but one of the things that I have asked all the wardens to do is to begin the process of planning for the development and implementation of earned living units across the system. And I can tell you that even Rush City right now is having some very preliminary discussions about what that could look like and all of those things, because we do believe that this has merit. Where some of the things that we're hearing from the men at Stillwater and the earned living unit are very similar to the things we're hearing from those that are housed in the Faribault earned living unit. And while the physical layout is obviously different, nonetheless, the opportunities and the changes are welcomed and valued by the people who live in there. And there is a much deeper commitment to pro-social community living. And we want to make sure that we're creating that to the fullest extent possible across the system. So that when Stillwater closes in 2029, that we have a plan, there's a planful mechanism for being able to transfer people to ELUs across the system. Now that's going to have to be thoughtfully done, but we believe that that's viable and possible. We are also just looking in general about what the population trends are expected to be based upon projections. And we do believe that the ability to manage these changes based on the data that we have today is that we will be able to create these ELU units and have people coming from Stillwater assumed elsewhere. We are also in conversations and planning relative to looking at the issue of moving the Atlantis treatment program to another facility, because we want to make sure that we keep those treatment beds, which are so critical to people who are in the system. And planning is underway about how to manage the needs around the restrictive housing population. And a variety of discussions are happening in that space as well. I think it's also important to note that we are at least having some discussions about how do we think about the future and the future needs of the DOC. And the future is not just about replacing or changing, increasing the number of beds in the system. It really is about how do we make sure that the state is investing in modern correctional infrastructure that supports the rehabilitative and transformative needs of the people in the system. So Carl and team are really having discussions. We are having conversations with the chairs of the capital committees and the governor's office about what does the future look like and what are those needs, and how do we make sure that we have safe settings for people to one, be housed, and two, importantly, to participate in and be engaged in rehabilitative programming. So those conversations are happening. We also have had people ask the question, because remember, one of the things that had been identified by the Office of the Legislative Auditor was that they had recommended back in 2000 that the department and the legislature begin having conversations about the potential replacement of both Stillwater and the St. Cloud facility. St. Cloud is I think, believe just slightly older than the Stillwater facility. There are some differences between the two, and Stillwater was prioritized because its needs are higher or more pronounced by way of things like deferred maintenance. And so these were some of the reasons why Stillwater was prioritized first, but at some point in time, and this is not anywhere in the immediate future, but at some point in time, the legislature and the Department of Corrections will need to have conversations about how to best use the Stillwater facility, and whether or not there should be either substantial upgrades to the St. Cloud facility, an investment there, or replacement of it at some level. So those are conversations that are going to be well into the future. We have a lot to manage between now and the end of mid 2029. So there won't be anything happening quickly around that. But know that was identified by the Office of Legislative Auditor back in 2020, and has been, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, has been discussed for decades. And we are now where we are.
So there's sort of two things left to talk about, and I'm going to loop some of these together. But I'd first like to note that one person wrote about their son being absolutely much happier being at the Stillwater ELU. They say, thank you for creating such a wonderful program and the benefits that are provided. He was elated because of the Christmas tree lights, which he hadn't seen for some years, and the tennis shoes that ELU recipients are allowed to have is a nice bonus. But I have a couple questions then. For people with longer sentences, where will they go in 2029? And one person asks, has there been any thought to opening the Appleton, Minnesota prison? So there's some concern about where people will go in 2029.
Yeah, and as I said, we will have a plan, and we will have facility space and places for people to transfer as we get closer to 2029, and that certainly was part of this long ramp of the phase closure, to make sure that we have a thoughtful plan for how to transfer people in a way that doesn't cause them to feel like they're moving backwards. Now, there are some options right today that people at Stillwater have, like one of the ELUs has both their main cell, and then they have another cell for some of their property and projects and painting or whatever else things they're doing there. And that's not going to be just practical reality as we go forward. It was a simple something that was allowed during the course of this transition, that is pretty unique because of our situation. But nonetheless, we want to make sure that we're doing as much replication by way of freedom of movement, opportunities for programming, opportunities for kind of self-policing and self-leadership of that pro-social community as possible. And to the person who wrote about their son, I appreciate you saying that. It has been, for me, like, to go and talk to the people who are living there, and hearing about the kinds of things that these guys are doing with and for one another has been, I think, really remarkable. And I'm glad to hear that your son is having a good experience there. And we anticipate that to continue, expect that to continue. And I can say that we've heard the same things from ELU residents down at Faribault, and very, very positive.
Before we go to a question about infrastructure, I want to first have you address this question, Commissioner. What should victims of crime who may be watching this webinar take away from this if their abuser was transferred to an ELU?
And I want to be really clear about the fact that the people who are there remain in prison. The security protocols are there. What we want to do is make sure that when all is said and done, when every single person in that ELU today has the opportunity to be released at some point in time. And when that happens, we want to make sure that they are in the best possible position to be successful, number one. But number two, and equally important, is to ensure that that nothing bad ever happens at their hands to another person. That we want to make sure that our outcomes are achieving a goal of no more victims. Now that's a tall order, but we should endeavor that the people that come through our programs come back out into the community with an orientation that calls for no more victims. So I want to be I want anybody who is watching this and hearing this to know that while the positive things that are happening here are critical, we think, to the rehabilitation, to the demonstration of pro-social living in a community environment. It is also a correctional institution that does still limit full liberty and has to be focused on both accountability and a future where they one day leave prison, which the vast majority of the people in our system will. So we want to also make sure that, and I just this is related, that one of the things that we've come to realize more and more over the course of time is that the Department of Corrections is set up to both house people who have been issued a sentence by a court, and to restrict that liberty and to provide for the safety and security of both the people on the inside and the people on the outside. At the same time, one of the things that we realize, and we can see this in particular with people who are serving very long sentences, that oftentimes these people will have access to a range of programs and services that reduces their risk. And then we have that opportunity to speak with victims, and victims oftentimes, following the imposition of that sentence, are left behind. And we think that that's not okay. We believe that as a corrections system, that we should be looking at providing rehabilitative and healing opportunities for people who are sent to prison, because we endeavor to have no more victims upon a person's release. But we should also make sure that as people enter this system, that we are reaching out and connecting, and to the extent possible, connecting them with resources, ensuring that they can have a role and a voice, and can be and receive some support and understanding about what happens within DOC facilities and services and supervision. And so as we plan for the new processes around the Rehabilitation Reinvestment Act, one of the things that's built into that is early engagement with those crime victims who want to have a more active role, have notification, and want to provide input. So that's a priority that we have, because we cannot forget about the people who have been impacted by crime. And we cannot lock up and forget about the people who have committed those crimes, if we, in fact, endeavor to have a safer community where healing becomes the order of business. So I hope that provides at least some context. But and just know that if I or we or our victim services unit can provide some support or information, if that happens to be somebody who's on this call, we want to be able to do that. And if you reach out to me, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and connect you to any resources that we have here at the DOC or the resources that exist across the state to serve and support people who have been the victims of crime.
And
So
Commissioner, if I could just add to that too, this is Warden Bolin. I think really we're in a unique position here within the department, especially with our earned living units, that we're trying the best we can kind of replicate, make maybe a microcosm of community living. You need to understand that most of the individuals that are in these earned living units have gone through victim impact programming. And so now it's more of like a testing ground. Because I've had conversations, I know AWMO has had conversations about individuals about what they're doing as far as programming and at work and back on the living units, and how that to them is a positive step in the right direction, knowing that they have a victim or victims. And so it really gives us a unique opportunity to have those conversations and further emphasize accountability, responsibility, and what it takes to become a positive community member.
Okay, we're going to do one more question. Thank you, Warden Bolin. And this might be a spot for Carl. What is the DOC's plan for the Stillwater building after the closure? Perhaps just a short little recap.
Carl?
Very complex question. So our site, over 100 acres, over 50 buildings, over 1 million square feet under roof. I think of this place as a small city, self-sustainable, central heating plant, wells, water infrastructure, everything needed to sustain like a community would. So very complex, and it's important that I say we do not have a plan set in place what the next site is going to be, what the future generations of this site will bring. We are going through our decommissioning study, and we're laying out many different levels of information into our report. We are working with our 5 tiers of community engagement, seeking information on what the community would like to see in place, what the community is short of, working with local leaders on potential reinvestment acts for those facilities. And when we roll up our final report to legislation in the 3rd quarter of 2026, we're going to have 3 recommendations. We're going to have an as-is recommendation, and then we're going to lay out all the pros and cons of selling it as is. We walk away, we lock the front door, and we mark it as is. We're going to have a recommended option. The recommended option is going to show costs and all the other preparation work to get to that. What does a recommended option mean at today? I can't tell you what that means, but it could mean a combination of anything between as is and complete green space. So it could mean that buildings that are crisis condition or poor condition are abated and demolished, and then selected buildings remain for a type of redistribution or economic redevelopment. And our third option is going to be as a greenfield or as a full demolition and just bare acreage of land. That will be the third option. So again, all these options with the pros and cons, along with all the narratives of the community input, will be bundled into a nice report and provided to legislature later in 2026. Ultimately, it will be legislature and Department of Admin that will guide us through what those next phases of the site will be.
Thanks, Carl. Commissioner, do you have any final, or Warden Bolin or AWMO, do you have any final thoughts before we end our event this evening?
I just want to say thank you for joining this call. I want to thank you for your interest, and we just appreciate you all joining us tonight. And I just want to say how appreciative I am of both the staff, of the leadership at Stillwater, and frankly the people at Stillwater, the men who are incarcerated there, who I think have really done an incredible job when legislators were brought in and when media was brought in. speaking to what it was that they wanted the site to be, the positives, the things that they thought were making a real difference. And so this has been a collaboration, and I think there's credit that gets spread to everyone who's touched this, and I'm just really proud of everyone who's had a hand in it.
All right, with that, we will end for tonight. I wish everybody a very nice evening. Thank you.